Content warning. This episode contains graphic descriptions of wartime events, including intense situations, injuries, and death. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you for tuning in to another compelling episode of Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Today, we're not just sharing stories, we're unveiling the raw and unfiltered experiences of a veteran who faced extraordinary challenges. Your downloads, subscriptions, and likes help amplify these voices, ensuring their stories reach those who need them most. Today, we are happy to be speaking with legend Army veteran Mike Montgomery, originally from St. Louis, but now residing just across the beautiful Mississippi River in my hometown, Alton, Illinois. This is Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriegie's daughter, welcoming another legend of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Mike, it is a true honor to be speaking with you here today.
Thank you.
To begin, tell me a little about your family dynamic when you were growing up.
I was raised in South St. Louis. My father was a police officer. I have a younger sister. We were the only two children in the family. Mom eventually went back to work about the time my sister was in high school, I believe, and I'd just gotten out of high school. I went to military high school, CBC, if you're familiar with CBC. I graduated in 1964. Father had served in World War II, Army Air Corps, stationed mostly in Hawaii. He got there after Pearl Harbor. But he'd been stateside at that time.
You went to CBC High School, and then where did you go after that?
I went to Parks College of Aeronautical Technology, part of St. Louis University. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer.
Oh, did you?
I wanted to. Differential equations and advanced mechanical drawing kind of convinced me maybe that wasn't my thing. So I wound up getting a degree in aeronautical administration, business degree essentially. I went in service after school because I'd gone through ROTC.
How old were you?
Probably just 21. But I did work when I was in college. I was a copy boy and then a part-time reporter for the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. That's what I went back to after service.
You went to CBC, then you went to Parks College. What inspired you did you enlist or were you drafted?
No, I went through ROTC. I'd been enrolled in junior ROTC at the high school. It was all guys, and it was all military, uniforms all the time. I enjoyed it. Once I was in college, St. Louis University offered ROTC with the Air Force. I tried it for a couple months, not my cup of tea. I was used to more marching, more discipline, et cetera, et cetera. In the meantime, Washington University had gotten a reciprocal agreement with St. Louis U, and I could take Army ROTC through Washington University, still get credits at St. Louis University. I got into Army ROTC. I was much happier with that.
What was the difference?
More discipline, more regimen, more esprit de corps. Thought the Air Force was kind of lackadaisical about some of the things that I'd grown up with.
This was just at the beginning of the Vietnam War.
Right. Yes, this was 1964, 65. I figured I was going to get drafted. So I figured I'd stay with ROTC and I'd go in as an officer rather than an enlisted man.
Did you?
I did. Once you go through ROTC and you complete your basic training, you're a second lieutenant. I was commissioned at Fort Riley, Kansas, where I finished my basic. And 2 months later, I reported to Fort Sill for artillery officers basic school. In the Army, a slur for a second lieutenant was a shaved tail. That's because they used to cut tails off horses and mules when they were in training.
After basic training, then what happened?
I had a 2-month delay, and I reported to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, for 3 months of basic officers training. Much of it is essentially what any person in the artillery learns, and that is how you set a piece, how you clean a piece, all the things that go with that. We were particularly trained in being a forward observer because that's where most second lieutenants went. At the time, I had orders for Fort Polk, Louisiana, and a basic combat training brigade down there, where I would have spent anywhere from 6 months to a year before they sent me over to Vietnam as a forward observer. That was just the way the pattern was running in the field artillery. However, Fort Sill, down in Oklahoma, we were offered a chance to take a language course. You had to pass a language aptitude test, and I did. And they wouldn't tell us what language we were going to get, but either we were going to Washington, D.C., or we were going to Carmel, California. I passed the aptitude test, and they said, here's the deal. We'll send you to school for the better part of a year. You commit for 2 more years of service. There was D.C. or Carmel, and I thought, what the heck, I've always been a great believer in education anyway. So fine. Turned out I got German. I was sent to the East Coast, and I spent 9 months in Washington, D.C. at a school that was really run by civilians, and we could wear civilian clothes to the school. But we still had some military duties, like payroll officer or something like that you get capped to do. But they were infrequent. Basically, we're in school 6 hours a day, 5 days a week with tests, and we got to the point where we only spoke German in the class. There were probably maybe a dozen or 14 of us in the class. At the end, you had to take a test. Again, I passed with flying colors. I was almost good enough to be rated a translator. I took to it. I liked it. And lo and behold, Uncle Sam sent me to Germany. Really? How about that?
Can you imagine?
Yeah, listen, a lot of people got assignments that just left them scratching their heads. I was stationed in Germany for almost 2 years with Special Ammunition Support Command. That was a group that held nuclear weapons. We had the entire Ruhrgebiet, that was the industrial area of northern Germany, ringed with little outfits like mine, the ammunition for atomic projectiles. We did a lot of training. It was mostly a training outfit. We'd do field exercises twice a year. It was interesting. Interesting enough, it was part of NATO as well. And so the units I worked with, while we were on the German economy and we dealt plenty with German, they spoke either French or Flemish. They were Belgians, which is very much like German. There's 2 different parts of Belgium. There's the French Belgians, where there are the Belgique, and they only speak French. And then the Flemish, who are outgoing, American kind of sort of people, great sense of humor and what have you, and they spoke German, Flemish, English, right? So we had 2 battalions we served. One was an 8-inch projectile outfit, mobile. These were World War II relics, but it had an 8-inch projectile. And we could configure that with atomic rings and things like that to change the yield. The other outfit were Honest John missiles. It's about a 12-foot long missile. We could configure the warhead to have certain atomic yields. The warheads were kept in concrete bunkers where we ran guards 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Outer perimeter security was provided by the Belgians. Inner security was by Americans. We worked with dummies. We had all the atomic components to assemble an 8-inch howitzer shell or the warhead of a 12-foot missile. I was NATO top secret. We had a unit of about 40 individuals, all artillery personnel, 2 crooks, of course. We had microwave units staffed by 8 communications people because we had this huge tower. The tower itself is fairly big, but the dish was humongous. And this was the early days of microwave technology for communication. But this was really something.
How long did you spend there?
Nearly 2 years.
Assembling and
Training.
You were in training.
Yes. In fact, to become a trainer in the technical end of it, you were sent to a weeks-long school. It was down in the Bavarian Alps, very nice place, over Ammergau, where they do the Passion Play every 10 years. Interestingly enough, I was down there the year they were doing it. I did not have time to go see it, but some people did. So I was certified in the mechanics of 8-inch howitzer shells and Honest John missiles. Then I would go back. There was page by page is how to assemble these things, We were also inspected, it seemed like every month, but it was probably at least every 3 months. And once a year we would go to Grafenwehr, was the huge area where NATO troops practice. U.S., French, Belgian, German, and it was always in the winter. And it was colder than Billy B. Damn.
What did you practice?
We actually fired a missile. We actually set off shells, but no atomic measurement to them. So we got hands-on training once a year, real hands-on training. I mean, we would roll out dummy warheads, for example, put them on trucks or put them on the missiles and truck them down to Grafenwehr. Those lumbering old self-propelled 8-inch howitzers would get down there, and we'd fire those too. We had 3 officers in our unit. There was 1 captain and then 2 lieutenants, and one of us had to be there at all hours. So every third night you were sleeping at the caserne, our little unit there.
How many hours a day did you work?
They were approximately 8-hour days. We'd have movies in the rec room in the evenings. We had 3 square meals a day.
You lived there?
No, the bachelor officers could live, or married officers too, could live away from the caserne. But we had senior sergeants, they had their own rooms. Then we had a squad bay where some 30 people or so slept in the old bunks, upper and lower.
So you spent 2 years there, and then where'd you go?
I got orders for Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center. Basically, it was a 6-week course on being an advisor to the Vietnamese. You learned a little Vietnamese so you could get by. You learned about various programs that were going on, like Chu Hoi was a surrender program, Phoenix program dealt with hidden infrastructure of Viet Cong, all sorts of things like that. So then I had my orders to report to Saigon.
How was that?
My 25th birthday, I was on a plane full of GIs. We'd left Travis Air Force Base in California. I was on my way to Saigon. Happy birthday, Michael. Uncle Sam sent you on a trip. So got
Expenses paid.
Yeah, that's true. Got to Saigon, and you fill out a form, what's your name, rank, serial number, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any particular place you'd like to be or go or something like that? At this time, I was just turned captain, picked up an Army Commendation Medal in Germany for my leadership. I was a section leader, and then after the section leader moved on, I became the company commander. So I had my command experience in, and I was thinking, the Army's not so bad, and here I am. So I put in for infantry. Even though I was artillery, I asked for an infantry assignment.
That's dangerous.
Well, yeah, but if I was going to stay in the Army and getting a promotion, what have you, combat experience would help.
Made choices. It was based on kind of like corporate America. This is going to get me to.
This is a good job to take, yes, except Uncle Sam threw me a curveball. Because if I'm artillery and I say I'll take infantry, right? Well, we'll put him anywhere. So I wound up with the military police and the provost marshal's office. This was the headquarters for the entire Vietnam at MACV headquarters in Saigon. Not quite what I was looking for.
What was that job like?
It was a desk job, 10 hours a day desk job. It was reviewing regulations. It was taking cases that were presented to you and making a determination. Like, for some reason, MACV limited you to only 1 souvenir rifle. And if you didn't capture one yourself, the Vietnamese would give you one. I have a German Mauser. It was like a parting gift from the Vietnam Army. So one day a guy showed up in the office. Well, he'd done 2 tours, so he was entitled to 2 weapons. And so we went round and round. We checked the regulations, and there was no authority, there was no appeal or anything, right? So it was kind of stuff like that.
That was a little different than your hands-on experience.
Yeah, I was. There was a desk job.
For a hands-on type person.
Well, I wanted to see a little more action in city in Saigon. So we also worked with the civilian customs agents, as well as the CID and the CIA. Oh, it was a full-blown. There were investigations going on, black market, drug sales, things like that. I was tangentially involved with that. Wow. I mean, I knew some of the CIA people that, knew where some of the things were, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, however, this point is 1971. The war is winding down, and units are being moved out wholesale. So a civilian customs agent who'd been there for years. Anyway, he was a GS-15. That's like a full colonel. It was a civilian equivalent of a full colonel. He was going out and make inspections of various places where troops were being pulled out. And he wanted to check the MP operations that go through the luggage, that go through the rules to make sure people understand what they can bring back, when they're going to get out, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wound up escort officer. carried a 45 and a Car 15. That's a smaller version of an M16. And we went all over the place. Dubai, Phuket, Cameron Bay, a couple other places. Just looking over operations to make sure everything was on the up and up. I mean, I saw a guy, he had a big wooden box he built himself, and he had all this junk packed in there, right? Turned out it had a false bottom, and he was trying to take home an AK-47. Because the civilian was a GS-15 when we stayed in Cameron Bay, Cameron Bay was a huge port. There were thousands of GIs there. And he got his own trailer, which I got to sleep in too. If he needed a helicopter, he'd just call for one. So we traveled around, we'd use planes, we'd use helicopters for shorter hops and all that. One night, 5 o'clock in the morning, that trailer lifts off its supports, slams back down. And he wakes up, I wake up, he says, "Was that thunder?" I said, "No, sir, grab your vest and get dressed." Viet Cong sappers had gotten beyond the wire and hit the ammo dump. And there was one hell of a fire going on, and the big booms were 5,000-pound bombs called daisy cutters. And they were stored there because Cameron was an air base as well. That's what woke us up. And we just went. The whole place was on red alert, but basically it was firefighters, backup firefighters, taking care of the blaze, and stuff exploding every now and then. That was the most exciting adventure we had while we were on the road. But I got back to Saigon. There I was in Saigon again, right? The full colonel, was in charge of the office. And he says, "So would you like to do something else?" I said, "Well, what do you got in mind?" He said, "You can be psychological operations officer for the Central Prisoner of War Camp." So I spent my last 6 or 7 months on Phu Quoc Island, which was actually it's in the Gulf of Thailand. It's actually closer to Cambodia than it is to Vietnam. But we had 25,000 prisoners there, 10 compounds. Psychological operations consisted of assisting bringing in political warfare shows. Like, they come in, they do some magic, they have some girls sing and dance, native stuff, always though, celebrating the culture of our country. Let's all be one again together. We had prisoners who were honorable prisoners, Chu Hois. They'd surrendered and they just wanted to get back to their families. So they had duties where they were outside the barbed wire. We have 10 compounds. One compound was just for the maimed. People lost limbs, people scarred forever by napalm, things like that. The compounds were divided into North Vietnamese, Viet Cong officers versus DMs, etc., etc. Duties also consisted of dealing with the regional forces and popular forces. Those were home guards, if you will. We had 4 battalions of Vietnamese military police. Again, it was a 24/7 perimeter that was manned. Watchtowers at all corners and in between. As a duty officer for the Americans, probably, maybe once every 10 days or so, you'd go with a driver and armed, and you'd run the outer perimeter road. You'd do that a couple times during the night just to make sure everything was kosher.
Now, was the outer perimeter all barbed wire?
Oh, yeah. It was all dead forest too. It'd all been painted orange years ago. And then there was a dirt road that ran around the compound. I couldn't begin to guess the compound size, but imagine 10 barracks, if you will. And they were open barracks too. You could see through them. Nobody had any privacy. We had an American dentist who would fly in from Canto. That was our nearest large supply base. He'd just spend all day yanking teeth. And they were glad to have those teeth yanked because there was no medication for them. That fell a little bit to my office too. But it was just me, one translator, and a number of Vietnamese officers.
Do you still speak Vietnamese?
I could go to a Vietnamese restaurant and be cute with the waitress.
What about German?
Spoke it pretty well, even after I got back from Vietnam. Because my father was a cop, and his last district from which he retired was down in South St. Louis. There's still German groups down there. So I could carry on a conversation and kibitz on cards and things like that. But my German's quite lacking now. And my Vietnamese is down to just some phrases.
You were doing this for 6 to 7 months, and what was the most interesting part about it?
The first thing that comes to mind is it's not very interesting. It's kind of tragic. We only lost one member of our team, and we had probably about 35 American officers and enlisted men there. And right next door to us was a civilian construction company. They built the airport there, the airport being one long strip, and we had a plane fly in every day. Well, there was a fishing village next to us, but down the road at the airport, they built a landing for huge LSTs, a Korean LST with the doors that open up out of the front of the bow. Huge ship. Well, they would bring in rice and medicine and other incidentals, keep the prison compound going. And they'd show up once a month. The civilians, they were paid contractors. They built things. There was a well system to be maintained, and there was at the village. They'd take care of that. They'd strung some electric lights to feed off our generator, and they paid Viet Cong taxes too. We were out doing some further, just checking the outer perimeter and going. And we came to sort of a good-sized crossroads in the jungle, and there were two 55-gallon drums of asphalt there. The civilian company had left them for the Viet Cong to keep the peace.
What was the greatest challenge?
I don't know. I mean, you know.
You took everything in stride.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't real charged up to be there, right? I did what I was supposed to do. I never shirked my duties, but I guess the taxing thing would be kind of missing the United States. I don't know.
Did you ever get leave?
I was one of the superstitious guys. I was saving my R&R. They'll fly you any place you want. People go to Australia, people go to Bangkok, et cetera, for a week or so, 10 days. So I was saving mine for when I was like really short, when I didn't have much time left. And then they came along and said, the war's winding down. How'd you like to go home 2 months early? Or you could stay and take your leave. I said, hell, I'll go home early.
Oh, so you never got to take your leave?
Never got to take my leave.
Oh my God. Okay. This is such a wide variance of duties, a wide variance of experience.
Right.
How did that affect your life after?
War was winding down. I was surplus material because they had lots and lots of officers. So I got back to the States, and I was still, and my next duty assignment was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I was S3. That's a battalion level coordinating officer for education. And of course, the whole thing was a basic combat training brigade. We had 10 companies, each company with about 100 men. And we put them through an 8-week course, starting with learning to march, right, and then survival, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, I oversaw paperwork. I would fill in if they needed somebody on the range. I'd inspect certain facilities. I'd watch the gas chamber. Part of your basic training is you're put in a room and they have tear gas in there. And you go in with a mask off and you have to take your mask, stand in front of the sergeant, give your name, rank, and serial number, and then you can run out. And everybody runs out crying and coughing. That's part of the basic training for everybody. It was when I was there. So I wrote to the personnel officer of the artillery branch, right? I said, hey, put me in for jungle school, put me in for airborne, put me in, you name it, right? And they got back and said, no, with your varied experience. That wasn't quite how they put it, I forgot. But anyway, it's not looking like, no, we're not putting you in for any further schooling at this time. So I knew it was coming. They were going to rift me out anyway, reduction in force. In the meantime, though, under federal law at the time, my seniority had accrued at the Globe Democrat, and I was guaranteed a job. So I checked, make sure all that was there, and I said goodbye to the Army and went back, took a month off, and lived down in Florida with a buddy of mine who'd done 2 tours in Vietnam. We just hung out in Fort Lauderdale. He was working as a waiter at the time. We had a good time. And then come January of the following year, I was back at the Globe Democrat as reporter.
With your training and the MP information, you're probably able to get a story out of just about anybody.
The way I used to get stories, for 3 years I covered the federal courts. Press had good access to everybody, and once a day I'd drop in and see the U.S. attorney. And I got to be good friends with a number of the assistant U.S. attorneys. I got to know FBI agents. Guy I used to work with when I was a kid, I used to sell popcorn at the arena, well before I got a job with the Globe Democrat. He was an usher there. He wound up being a Secret Service agent. Cornelius Hesselbusch. Kind of unforgettable name. Corny was one of the inside people there. And the way I would get stories is somebody'd drop a hint, because they like to talk. And with that hint, I'd go to somebody else, right? And I'd say, I understand, you got a wiretap going in a bar. What? Who told you that? I said, don't worry about it. I'd start piecing stuff together like that. In one case, though, before a major mafia player was indicted, FBI agent gave me the indictment before it was public. I got along well with people.
You have to think about, and even dealing with the nuclear weapon and then your military police, you learned how to speak.
Yeah. Well, my father had the gift of gab, and I got it too. I'll tell you a couple funny stories. I got a new Corvette. You could order one over in Vietnam and get a great price reduction. And so here I am. I'm flying into St. Louis from San Francisco. Probably it was like a red eye. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and my parents were there. Right? I was looking at my watch. I said, "It's 8 o'clock." I said, "Do you think they're open yet at the Chevy dealer?" And no, it wasn't open yet. So anyway, I went home. Glad to see my parents. Let me tell you, had coffee with my parents. I said, "Well, it's after 9. Let's go get that Corvette." So here I am, 25 years old, veteran riding, driving a new Corvette. Work orange with the black interior, convertible, of course. Yeah. So one day they sent me off in a shooting in North St. Louis. And a guy had shot somebody, had a shotgun. He was barricaded in the second floor of an apartment, right? And I knew some of the other media people. And they later gave me an 8mm strip of film. There I am, taking notes, just leaning against my Corvette while everybody else is ducking down. I wasn't the least bit worried about a shotgun 100 yards from me. There's something else you'd mentioned. I found after I got back, two things. After I got back to the Globe Democrat, I didn't know any Vietnam veterans. Nobody talked about it. Nobody said welcome back or anything like that. This would have been 1973, 74, 75. One guy from the editorial department once came up and said, "Hey, I understand you're in the Marines." I said, "No, I was in the Army." "Oh." It's just somebody told me you're in the Marines. "No, I was in the Army." And that was it. Then another guy that I worked with at the Globe Democrat, he said, "Yeah, I was over in Vietnam." I said, "Yeah?" He said, "Yeah, I went in the Peace Corps for 2 years because I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I no more got out of the Peace Corps, and they drafted me, and off I went to Vietnam." He says, "I went through my basic training, my AIT, Advanced Individual Training, sent me right over to Vietnam. I got shot the first month I was there, shoulder wound anyway, sent me home and kicked me out." But I didn't find it strange. I was just fitting back into civilian life, what have you. When I came back, I think people known I'd been in service, especially the ones who'd been there when I left for service. It was just no big deal. I was a reporter and worked your butt off, One day, in fact, it's New Year's Eve. I'd just gotten off a late shift. I pick up a date and we go down to Soulard. And there's a guy, it was kind of a hippie joint, right? And there's a guy with his guitar, and he's sitting on his bar stool in the middle of the floor with a microphone in front of him. And he started singing a song about Vietnam, and he used some Vietnamese expressions. And so when he took a break, I said, "Hey, where'd you learn your Vietnamese?" He said, "I was over there." I said, "Yeah, me too, brother." So we started talking, and yeah. In fact, in Florida, let me regress for a moment. In Florida, I was wearing a Vietnamese bracelet, and I met a guy at a bar who recognized the bracelet. We talked about Vietnam. He was a Navy SEAL. So it turns out he was anti-war and a member of the Vietnam Veterans Consortium, the Missouri Consortium. So I got kind of involved with those guys. Just knew who they were, went to their parties, talked. And then 1982, Reagan's elected, and his first year, he establishes the Vietnam Veterans Leadership Program. It was a public-private partnership. 50 organizations across the United States would get $50,000 for 2 years, I think, each time 2 years. We were going to help veterans. That was the same time veterans walk-in storefronts started having counseling. Are you familiar? Yeah, okay. That was part of it too. So I knew some more of those guys. Luckily, in St. Louis, there was a fellow named Pat Schomer, and he'd worked for years with the Job Training Partnership Act, taking homeless people, recovering alcoholics, druggies, etc., and getting them a 6-month job stint to see if they could make it. Well, that translated right into the EVLP. At this time, I was doing freelance public relations and what have you, having left the Globe Democrat. Worked with them for a couple years until our federal funding ran out. Ronald Reagan invited us all up to the White House. I got to go to the White House with about 4 of my peers from our group, and there's guys from all over the country. And they were all Vietnam veterans. We had a great time up there for 3 days. The last day, Reagan has us in the gold room. We're just packed, sitting on chairs, right? He's about 30 minutes late. He comes in with Nancy, gives a great speech about you've done so well. I want you to keep up those connections you've got in your community. Keep working, Vietnam veterans deserve a break, yada, yada, yada. With that, they cut off our money. However, the VVLP continued. So, like I say, we're all sitting on these little chairs, and Reagan's going down the center aisle with Nancy, right? And everybody jumps up to shake his hand. Well, I wasn't close enough to even try. But in my, this finds himself face to face with Nancy Reagan. I witnessed this. And he says, nice place you got here. And she said, yeah, we like it. And then they had a big cocktail party for us in the West Wing. That was impressive. There were all sorts of military officers there to, help you get a drink, have you get you some hors d'oeuvres, whatever. And I asked this Air Force captain, I said, where's the men's room? She says, go through that stairwell. And just to tell you how impressive the place was, get down there, and there's a leather-covered door, with brass studs in and all that. You go through it, and yet there's another door, and this time we're in a tiled little bitty hallway. You go through that, there's like 10 urinals, half a dozen stalls, and all that. But in the antechamber, there were bookcase after bookcase, waist to ceiling. They were covered with plexiglass, my big glass, and they were all American novels, first editions. Big, comfortable wing chairs to sit in. And then you went through the other door, and there was just, a latrine. It was pretty impressive. Something else in the same vein I'd mentioned. 3 years I was out of the country. 2 years in Germany, a year in Vietnam, a little more than 3 years. And I came back, and later I discovered people were talking about things that happened in 72, 3, and all that. Yeah, nope, never heard of that group. Nope, never saw that movie, In West Germany, we had a rec room with a pool table and foosball and all this. Plus, the Belgians had a nice little bar just off our compound. But no, the movies were all 2 and 3, 4 years old. They were first-run movies at the time. And in Vietnam, yeah, we could set up a movie projector, and we had an outdoor. It was covered, but it had benches on. You could watch the movies there. That was most every night.
Take where you are today, and you look back. What did you see that changed that you didn't recognize at the time, other than the movies? So now you look back and you go, I didn't notice this back then.
To be honest, I don't think there was anything in particular. Bell bottoms are still around, for example. Tie-dye had given way to dashikis and things like that. But no, I really didn't notice a lot of cultural difference in that regard.
Did your service inspire anybody in your families to?
Not that no. In fact, I had a niece. She wanted to be a nurse. And I kept saying, go into an armed services program. So they'll pay for your schooling. You'll get experience you couldn't get elsewhere. No, she didn't want to do it. But I didn't hold that against, but I did urge her strongly to consider it. I used to work with a guy at the Globe Democrat, great guy. He went on to become pretty wealthy in public relations. Anyway, but every now and then I'd chime and say, what'd you ever do for your country? And she said, I was born August 13th, and my draft number was 361. I wasn't going.
What did you do in spare time?
I'm retired from SIUE. I retired 17 years ago. I was an instructor in mass communications and advisor to the school newspaper. And I did that for more than 12 years. So I decided at that time that I was going to get back in shape. Starting at age 59, I started working out again. And I dropped a whole lot of weight. I work out every day.
What's your regiment?
Our basement's a gym. 4 days a week I do lifting. 3 days a week I do a little cardio every day, of course, but 3 days a week I do flex, balance, and cardio. The reason I had to get back in shape was I was working at the Telegraph after a stint in California. Remember the Globe Democrat folded. I went out to California for 3 years. And in California, got a motorcycle. Got 2 motorcycles, actually. I'd had a bike in college, but my father was a motor cop for the city of St. Louis. And he got banged up a lot. So when my mother found that I had a bike, she says, no, you don't. Anyway, we did not mention motorcycles after my brief experience with a Honda Dream. So out in California, I got back into it. So when I moved back here, I got more into it. I really got into biking. I have been in every state in the Union but Hawaii. I've been to Alaska. I've been across Canada at least twice. We went up there in July, just after my birthday, hotter than hell, running the interstate up to Winnipeg, right? Next day, got up in Winnipeg, right? This is 2 days into the trip. And we're headed to the Alaska Highway, Yellowhead Highway, I think it is. Missed it a little bit, right? And it was kind of cool and overcast, so we put on our leather. We never took our leather off the rest of the trip. that was July, August and July. It was cooler up there. We went all the way up to Fairbanks, about 18 days on the road, 7,800 miles. July, the flowers were just enormous. It was great. Land of the midnight sun. Gee, it's 11 o'clock. Why aren't I tired now? The sun's still up.
Do you still ride?
Yes, but I've gone to 3 wheels. I had 125,000 miles on the bike I just sold. Like I said, we got around. In fact, we were just looking at the television this morning, and they were showing some pictures of Monument Valley. My wife and I have been here 3 times. We really like going out to southern Utah, southwestern Utah. Arches, windows, to get to windows. Yeah. Zion, Bryce. There's a little town called Greenville on the Green River, and that's in Utah. And there's also one in Montana. The little bar first time I was out west with a buddy, we saw the Grand Canyon, Petrified Forest, and we were taking the long way to Sturgis, the rally in South Dakota. We did 3,000 miles just to get there. We were all over we're on the interstate, and it's closed because there'd been a fatal accident a couple miles ahead. So we got routed off. We get routed through Greenville, right? Smell these hamburgers. Found this little bar called Ray's, and just had a big open griddle, behind the bar. Best hamburger ever. I've been to Ray's 5 times. We made it a point of going there every time we got there.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
2 good deeds you might be interested in when I was in service. When I was at MACV, there was a PX in the building. It was a very large building. And there was a young lady who worked there. Her name was Tu, T-U, which means flower. Co-Tu had an older sister who had a huge, I've never met the woman, but she had a huge benign tumor in her stomach. And she couldn't get anybody on the economy to take it out. So I knew a guy who was with the American hospital there, the military hospital, and he did her a favor, took her sister in, took good care of her sister, and everything's fine. The young lady gave me a little gold charm. It's a Buddhist good luck charm. It looks like a swastika, but it has a different name. The bench crosses are always called swastikas anyway. No association, of course, with Nazis. So I still have that, of course. And a couple of years before that, none of our troops at the German unit were married, and they could live on the economy with their wives. And the wives would get together and be supportive of one another, Americans. So they decided to adopt an orphanage, a German orphanage. And they made some games, and they bought some things, and I guess they crocheted some things too. And they talked me into being Santa Claus because we had the Belgians we worked with. Well, they had a helicopter company there. They were the little helicopters with the all clear plexiglass bubble. Anyway, two seaters. They flew me in as Santa Claus. Had a white beard, Of course, at the time I was clean shaven, but anyway, but I could speak German. So that made me the natural to be, good deed both countries. You ask what's the funniest thing that happened? It's funny now. I'm still laughing. So there I was, just returning to stateside. I'm down at Fort Leonard Wood, right? Fort Leonard Wood is in the middle of nowhere in central Missouri. It's so isolated that enlisted women were allowed into the officers' club. And I met one. She was Puerto Rican. She was a specialist, a corporal, if you will. She worked in the hospital as a technician. So we started dating, which is kind of frowned upon, right? Oh, yeah, officers should not consort with enlisted personnel. After a couple of weeks, it's mandatory. You go to the general's reception to welcome the new officers to Fort Leonard Wood. Dress blues and everything. So I called up the base protocol officer, and I said, can I take an enlisted woman to the general's reception? He said, sure. Just don't tell anybody. Here's another captain just back from Vietnam. So I did. Well, she was 5 foot with black hair down to her fanny, and she was wearing a red velvet dress, and she really filled it. Yeah, well. So that was a Saturday night. Monday, I'm filling in as range officer. The troops are learning to use M16s, and the field telephone rings, and the RT, telegraph phone operator says, sir, you're wanted back at battalion headquarters. Oh, yes, okay. And There was this field artillery colonel who was there in charge of my battalion. Kind of a forward person anyway, right? And got some rough edges. Montgomery, you took an enlisted woman to the general's reception. I said, yes, sir. He said, damn it, man, why'd you do that? Sir, base protocol officer said I could. And for the few choice words, he just told me to get the hell out of his office. However, the battalion, his commander didn't like it. So I wound up pulling some weekend duty for a month of Saturdays, four Saturdays in a row. I had to be the duty officer, which just meant you slept in a chair in the office, but anyway, it's still fun, Although I have to say, you ask about doing anything differently. If I wanted to stay in service, I would have just insisted on going to an artillery unit when I got to Vietnam. I don't know if I could have insisted on it, but I could have told them it makes no difference to me. I could have skipped telling them that. That's how I wound up with the provost. And then, with any luck, having had artillery experience, I might have gotten an artillery assignment when I got back. Then you're on a career path. I thought I was doing the right thing for a career path when I said, doesn't matter. Actually, as I said, I want infantry. I didn't finish telling you one thing. There was a civilian compound next to us in Vietnam. There was a young guy. Most of them were pretty young guys. And they lived on a barge, right? It was all made up in dorm rooms and all that. And he had never seen color TV. This was 1973. Wow. Anyway, but he had a shitload of money stashed back in the States. And he was going home and he was going to live it up. And he got liquored up. And he walked right into a prop and veneer plate. And they tried to stitch him, met folks there, flew him to Canto, died. So when you ask me if there was anything, that's one of the most chilling things I remember. We'd get the occasional stray shot at us and the occasional mortar, but the island was tapered. It was 50 kilometers long through the long axis and shaped about like South America. We had the bottom 10. A little village, fishing village, airstrip, prisoner compound. The prisoner compound was between us and the village was over here, and then here was the jungle. Then there was another town way up north where they made the best nuke mom in the world. Nuke mom is fish sauce.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
10-foot high earthen crocks, layered with fish, salt, sealed with mud, and it sits there for 8 weeks in the sun. And then they crack it and drain it off, and it runs clear as can be, and it tastes like dead fish. It smells to the heavens. But a couple drops here and there, it's all right. And we had guys, they would fill Pepsi bottles and put corks in them, and they'd get that fresh nuke bomb, and they'd go to Saigon and get a hooker for a weekend just for that. Each year for the last 11 years, 12 years maybe, we've done a Veterans Day program raising money for honor flights. Are you familiar with honor flights?
I've heard of that.
Well, there's one up in Springfield, and we've raised more than $50,000 for that organization by selling pies, by gathering donations. And each time I've interviewed people who've been on the honor flight. And of course, there was a greater concentration of World War II veterans. I know a guy who's still around. He lost part of his leg at Iwo Jima trying to help another Marine. Rocket got them both. Anyway, but that guy had been gotten already. I knew another guy I interviewed, 56 days of combat fighting through the Philippines once they landed again. 56 days of combat. Somebody shooting at you. They would no more call themselves heroes, And
I do consider you and everyone a hero, even though you don't consider yourself a hero. To me, it's you, whether you were drafted and had to go or you enlisted, you went to fight for our freedom. You went to fight for the Vietnamese freedoms. You went to fight for freedoms for people that could not fight for themselves. Not only that, you were willing to risk your life to make and I know it sounds trite, but you were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for your country.
Every veteran, regardless of how they came to be in service, signs a blank check when they take the oath.
To me, that's just inspiring.
Now,
When you speak with civilians today and that you say that you were in Vietnam, how are you received?
these days, it's thank you for your service. And I wanted to bring this up anyway. Everybody calls you a hero. Have you, in the research you've done so far, did you ever see anybody call himself a hero? No.
So you had a great career.
Yeah.
I really thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
I'm glad you're doing this.
Well, thank you.
If you are a veteran or you know someone who is, I urge you, share your story. Whether you fought in battle or worked behind the scenes, your experience matters. It's not just history, it's our history. It is a history we cannot afford to lose. At Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, we are committed to preserving these stories, but we need your help. Subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends and family, and most importantly, if you have a story to tell, reach out to us on social media or email. Both are listed in the description. Every veteran's story deserves to be heard, remembered, and honored. So join us on this journey. Together, we can ensure that Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel live on. If you would like to purchase a copy of my dad's memoir, Writings from the Barbed Wire Hotel, please click the link in the description. In the back of almost 800 pages is an index of all the sources I used to research my dad's military career and time as a prisoner of war, which may help you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Let's spread the word and keep these stories alive. And remember, every story matters, especially yours. Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel was written by and produced by Diana Mall Halstead. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Thanks for listening.